Welcome, everyone, to the Nerd Journey Podcast, episode number 40. We're joining you every week to talk IT career, news, and opinions based on our points of view. I'm your host, John White, at VJourneyman on Twitter, joined by my co-host, Nick Cordy, at NetworkNerd_. Hey, Nick, how's it going?
It's going well, John. I feel kind of like we're over the hill with the episode 40. I mean, you know what that's about. I'm a young guy. But hey, I want to make sure the listeners know that we're both VMware solution engineers looking to bring them the career advice we wish we'd been given earlier in our careers. We hope our discussions will be relevant across the disciplines and remain timeless. If you're enjoying our content, please drop us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you subscribe. And if you want to get in touch with us, tweet or DM at Nerd Journey. Ultimately, we're just two nerds on a journey.
A journey to virtual enlightenment.
So let's take a trip.
Great, Nick. Hey, we're back with part 2 of our discussion with Paul Woodward of the Explore VM podcast and AJ Kuftic, one of his interviewees.
Yes, sir. It seems like we really got into the importance of being a technical communicator in this episode, and that kind of goes hand in hand with the move to the architect role. By the way, be listening for the best John White School of Mentoring plug yet. It's there.
Yeah, that's a real highlight. But let's dive back into the discussion with Paul and AJ.
You know what? Ignore John's lack of enthusiasm. Enjoy part 2.
So understanding your costs, that's what help drives the business. But the business doesn't care about Server 2012 versus Server 2016. They don't care about RHEL 6 versus RHEL 7. They don't care about all flash or hybrid or spinning. They don't care. They care that their application is up and isn't slow. And if you can define slow, you're a genius.
It's a different way of thinking, right? About business metrics maybe instead of technology metrics. I remember I was terrible at this. I had this revelation when I started working at VMware that I was really bad at selling my ideas upstream to my management. Like, hey, we need to upgrade to, backup version 8. Like, what version are we on now? 4. 8 is 4 better, right? And they're like, is 4 supported? Well, yeah. Are we okay? Backup wise? I'm like, well, I mean, yeah, but it's 4 better. Nah, I don't think we have budget for that. And that was like, okay, so I wasn't articulating our need for, backup, upgrades in any way that made any kind of difference to the business, right? They cared about, well, it was a distributor, so they cared about, latency and processing order lines, So if I could have, pitched any technology project that increased that, or, decrease the latency, increase the number of lines that an order entry person could process in any given, minute or hour, then that would have mattered, right? But
and I think that sort of thing, when you're talking about like version changes like that, a lot of times you are waiting for end of support. You're waiting for some sort of external factor to come in and push things along. Thank you, Microsoft, for putting in upgrade functions from 2012 to 2016 and 2016 to 2019, which means we don't have to go through this like rip and replace operating system thing anymore. Really appreciate that. But those sorts of functions are what you have to explain to the business, right? Like, why do I upgrade VMware things? Because, well, security patches is a big one, but maintaining support is the other one. It's, I can't be on 6.0 after whatever it is, March 2020, something like that. I forget what it is. Sorry if I scared anybody. But those sorts of functions that's what drives things. Honest to God, that's what drives this. Getting rid of anything requires you to have some sort of external reason and that you don't control anymore. If it's up to you and there's no real reason for you to upgrade, the business is not going to pay for it. They don't want to do that. They would like to maintain operations as smoothly as possible, and changing things like that is introducing risk, and businesses hate that. So in those sorts of functions, a lot of times we've spent not small sums of money in terms of, technology that is neat and cool for us. But a lot of times it's making sure that when we go to do things that I can sell it as, minimizing impact to uptime.
Hmm.
Right. So, hey, I'm just going to a little small plug for Cloud Foundation. Cloud Foundation makes doing my upgrades easier. Well, if it makes doing my upgrades easier, that's less risk. It's all sanctioned by VMware. It's all been kind of codified by VMware, and I'm capable of doing a vCenter upgrade with very, very little risk. Um, I'm capable of upgrading a whole bunch of vCenters and hosts and those sorts of things with very, very little risk in a very standardized manner, which means the business doesn't worry about that. Um, those are the sorts of things. That's how you sell those functions.
You're
It's
talking
it.
about, it's interesting. You said something very interesting, which is businesses generally won't just do version upgrades unless it's a support issue. But then you're mentioning something else, which is, a lot of times support issues are an interconnected web of dependencies. This version of the backup only supports this version of the array, or this version of, my hypervisor only supports, this version of the backup, and then it also requires this version of the array, and then these servers require this version of the hypervisor. So because of that interconnectedness, you have to do this like kind of stepwise function of upgrades, and which, as you pointed out, increases risk. Hey, maybe Paul, maybe I can draw you in here. Is that something that is part of your practice when you get brought in? Is articulating technology risk and business risk of making changes and of not making changes? Is that something that you know departments like IT departments are not actually good at, that they need somebody outside to actually come in and do?
I will say making the move up from the the SMB market up to like large business and enterprise, change control blew my mind. I got so used to just being able to go and do whatever I wanted, fire up the server, make these migrations, do these upgrades. Finally, seeing change control and understanding why it exists. Um, it was a little frustrating. It was a bit of an adjustment at first, again, because it kind of felt like it was restrictive, but it makes sense. It helps mitigate that risk to the business. Nowadays, when I'm out with clients doing the consulting side, more often than not, I have to explain where the not so much like where the risks lie, because they're very well aware of it. A lot of IT shops, going back to uh, what AJ was saying about the business cares about uptime, they've spent a lot of time analyzing the risk. What I encounter more often than not is this is how we can do it without giving you downtime. Or yes, we got to look ahead because that version of vSphere is coming up, and if you've got a storage refresh, we're going to run into a lot of issues. So it's more along the lines of you see the risk. How can I help you mitigate that going forward versus actually finding out where it exists?
So this is back to AJ's discussion of being able to speak their language, about understanding the risk that they're facing, and acknowledging that you're concerned about that too. And when they understand that you are concerned about it, then they're more likely to listen to you.
Yeah, one of the big one of the big things that I've had to learn over the last probably, I don't know, 7 years. I'd say 7 years, when I went to the partner and then came back to here, was talking to people around what it is that they're trying to do, and not just saying this is the cool new function that I want to upgrade from vSphere 4.1 to 5 because 5 is bigger than 4.1. Um, why are these things important? What are the things that you're trying to do? What are the features that you're trying to gain? Are you struggling with the ability to deliver what the business is looking for, right? And in those like earlier versions of vSphere, the big version jumps also involved changing the amount of resources you could apply to a VM, which then opened up more use cases for servers in the environment that they hadn't virtualized yet, because there's some sort of crazy big VM or whatever that didn't allow them to do that. So those sorts of changes that's where you start to make the upgrade. It's how do I make it so that the business doesn't worry about this? And one of the big selling points of virtualization 10, 15 years ago was the ability to move a VM from one physical host to another without taking any outage. Sorry to all the people who've got scars from a vMotion that has gone sideways, and shout out to all the people who have to do change controls for vMotions. You are the true heroes. Um, but in terms of the that ability, said, okay, I can refresh my physical hardware without having to take servers out. That actually improves the business, right? And I think I was a lucky boy, and I went to a school that I had to take a bunch of business classes. I had to take industrial psychology and marketing and finance and two different accounting classes and those sorts of things, along with all of a bunch of IT classes. So I learned how to speak their language. It's real fun when you go into a finance meeting. You talk about capital expenditures, operational expenditures, and straight line depreciation. They think they wonder where you came from. Um, so those are important. The technology itself is fine, and it'll change like 100 times. But the business itself, business rarely changes in terms of how they do those sorts of functions and how they look at things and how the business and how they're selling their things to their management. You're just a resource provider. There's these people have to sell it north to their bosses, to their management, because they're actually trying to do it to improve the business itself. So
Sure.
those are the sorts of functions. I like saying there is no innovation in infrastructure. There just isn't. It's just different ways to run stuff, right? So we could there's you could run in containers, you can run in VMs, you can run on physical servers. Regardless, you have an application to put somewhere, and it has to serve the needs of someone. So how do you do that, and how do you make it so that it's the least impactful way to do it for them? And it's not necessarily innovative in there, but you can definitely make changes to make improvements to their lives that they may not be thinking of.
I think the everything we've been speaking about is getting into the role of, say, the enterprise architect, that mindset of understanding the business requirements and not focusing so much on the functionalities. So I want to try and tease out a thought I had while you're talking. So take someone who is a technology administrator, whatever technology you want in the enterprise. All they do is break fix on that particular technology. I think, or at least my theory is, and you can tell me if you think I'm wrong, that it would be more difficult for that person to take on the architect type mindset where we're more focused on what the business requirements and needs are than someone who had worked in a smaller company in the small to medium business who actually was solely in charge of planning some new technology rollout, working with procurement, doing the actual implementation, and then doing the support after the fact. I feel like there's something to be said about the planning and implementation process that someone experiences that leads them to get to that mindset. Am I off base there?
Um, no, I don't think you're entirely off base. I think it's going to depend on the person, and I think it depends on how much they want to make that shift, right? I think somebody who from an SMB side is going to come in and they can do it a little bit more easily because they've had to have those conversations they're not talking to the storage array all day. They're not talking to the network switches all day. They're talking to the actual end users. They're talking to the business about what it is that they want to do, and the business is coming to, you know, Harry the all hat guy, right? They're talking to that person. They're talking to um, so he's had to have a lot of those conversations. I think a dedicated sysadmin for a specific technology, I think it would be more difficult for them. I don't think it's impossible though. And a lot of that comes back to, can you understand the questions that are being asked from a business side, and can you remove yourself from that? And I think if you're a sysadmin of a virtualization environment or a storage platform or a networking platform, and I'm picking on those three, you can go all the way into databases and middleware and all those other functions. It turns into, how much experience have you had with end users? How widely do you think? Because you can have somebody who's a sysadmin who has a lot of thoughts about a lot of other things. They just may not actually do anything about it, right? They may say like, "Oh, hey, well, if I were running this virtualization infrastructure, I would X," right? I feel that way about my networking and storage things, so kind of a lot. because I have that previous experience. But it's not necessarily like how I think about it going forward, right? And how I respond to a business that way. I don't like help them come up with a solution. I say, well, yeah, but if you're going to do this with the storage team, this is what you need to say. It's no, the storage team's involved, right? And it's more of that collaboration, especially in the larger enterprise. Um, so yeah, I think you're right. I think that an SMB person can make those can have those conversations a lot more easily just because they have the experience with it. But I don't think that it's impossible for an architect. Paul.
Yeah, and jumping onto your point, going back to, yes, the person who just does break fix day to day operations within that application, yes, they can make the move up into that role, into the architect role. But I think that actually depends on the person. You look at somebody who just, okay, I know I see this problem. This is what I do to fix it. Go back to watching videos on YouTube. Or you've got somebody who goes, okay, I keep seeing this problem over and over again. Why does this occur? Let me go talk to my, like, where does the storage come into play? Why are we losing these connections? Is it the network? Is it the compute side? You start to talk to the other members of the teams. You actually try to figure out why my application keeps breaking, other than right click, restart, fix, whatever, move on to the next one. I think that's the person that's going to be able to succeed moving into an architect role versus you don't have to come from the SMB side. And it's actually a little bit, I would say it's almost a little bit more beneficial to move if you're in a medium large business and you've spent that time, you've got an understanding of the business on a whole versus somebody coming up from the SMB space to be an architect in a large business. And it's just, again, it's all on the person. If they're going to take that time to actually try and understand and develop the skill, develop the understanding and the curiosity of why does this happen, instead of just, hey, it's fixed, on to my next ticket.
I suppose that it might depend on the person, as you both said, but maybe the culture of the department and the culture of the organization as well. A lot of times, I mean, I've walked into organizations where there's like an antagonistic culture almost on purpose
Mm-hmm.
between silos, which keeps them from interfacing for I don't know why, but that's just the way it is, and maybe people don't even remember why it was set up that way, and in that situation, it's actually really difficult to have an enterprise architecture team that it like grows organically from those silos, right? It's like
Yeah,
they're
I've had those sorts of things where I've actually had to talk people down from like, well, why are they doing it this way? I'm like, well, they're the networking team, or they're the storage team, or they're the compute team, and that's what the choices they made with their platform and their vendors and those sorts of things, and that's the way that they're going to go do it. If you would
Right.
like to change that, find yourself a position on their team, and then go do that. It's it is a if is it your problem? No. Is it going to be your problem? No. Then who's bothered by this? Like we can get into the battles, especially around like vendors of choice. I've seen a lot of that sort of gnashing of teeth happen where it's like, well, they use this vendor, that vendor stinks. I'd prefer that they use vendor Y, and I'm like, dude, it's moving bits, it's storing bits, it's crunching bits. Unless there's a distinct reason why, like, and I'm sure that they've probably gone through and figured this out, especially when there's like a large refresh comes through. They've probably gone through and like maybe taken a peek out there. And if they haven't, maybe they just have a preferred vendor because they have a better relationship with that vendor, or maybe they have a lot of institutional knowledge or a lot of team knowledge around how that vendor does things, and it works for them. Um, but yeah, the gnashing of teeth between teams. If when I see that, I just start to shake my head. I'm like, okay, you two need to get in this room and start figuring out why you hate each other, because this ain't gonna work for anybody, and this is how both of you get gone real fast. So, um, yeah,
sometimes it's organizational,
Yeah.
like it starts at, between two VPs, and then it filters down to the directors, not being able to politically position themselves as getting along, and then the managers the same, and then it's the individual contributors, and it's just set up that way. And
I've
Yeah.
the
go ahead, Paul.
I was going to say that the culture of a company, the culture of an IT department, plays big time into your ability to develop outside of your silo or outside of your skill set, as well as being able to help others move. I've worked in companies that we've had very poisonous attitudes. I've amongst various people. I've worked with companies that I still call back to some of these people and say, "Hey, this is what I'm seeing. What have you done?" Always willing to help, even though we work at different companies now or at even competing firms. It's just that attitude, that willingness to help. I've spoken numerous times about don't be a jerk. Give back to your team. When I'm at a conference, I come back and I'll tell my team, hey, this is what I learned. This is what I saw. If I'm at, like, I do a tech field day, I'll share this blog or I'll share this podcast with my team when it airs. Like, it's just that giving back, being willing to work amongst yourselves. And when somebody who's not part of your technology silo asks a question, don't tell them to bug off. Appreciate the fact that they want to learn. Hey, my application's running slow. I think, am I getting the information from the storage fast enough? How can we talk about that? I think that's breaking that negativity. And I see a hoodie up on the screen in front of me. The IT guy who sits in a corner with his hoodie up and the lights off. It's kind of like a thing of the past. If you're going to succeed, you need to be out there and you need to be a team player.
Yeah, and maybe that's a sign of working at a company that is kind of set up uh, for failure, of the organization, or not set up for the success of the individuals. Especially, you might want to maybe rethink your career path and whether it involves this organization if it's set up in this like antagonistic way.
Right. And something I had a thought I was thinking about company culture, corporate culture, and just thinking back on my career. Um, Culture doesn't come from a committee. It's a company wide thing on the whole. It starts at the top with the management. If you think throwing a few people together in a conference room is going to fix things, it's bigger. It's a bigger problem than that.
Yeah, and the culture has to be, if you've got bad culture, and you can pretty much sniff that out, and if you're new to an organization, it's a bad sign. Sometimes it can be changed, right? As Paul said, it starts at the top, but it doesn't end there. If you've got a good top level management, or if you've got a, at least a top level manager who appears to care about making things better. I will say that I've been involved in a number of projects and a number of things at my current company where um, I've lost a good bit of hair because of it. It's right. It's any frustration in any job. I've been in a bunch of other frustrating positions in my career. Um, but seeing things from the top and actually seeing change come from it turns things around and says, okay, maybe this is just one of those just no good, lousy projects that we just have to get through and it'll be fine. And the next project is going to be awesome. And sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. Um, but kind of believing in that message and understand seeing things. When the moment I walked in and heard, you guys have a dedicated test environment, like for real? How dedicated? And they said, oh no, we have like test storage and like full test networks, and like these are our test hosts. And I went,
Awesome.
I didn't think that happened. I thought that was a myth told by the lore, the legend of the lore. Right? But it was that there was a whole dedication at a corporate level to say, this is what we have to do in order to maintain our applications at the maximum amount of availability possible. And we want the investment that we're making here is less than the amount of money that it costs us to take an outage, or to take an outage because we didn't test it somewhere. And I went, people get it. Okay. All right. We can figure some things out here. So those sorts of things can be different, right? And when there is a dedication to it at a culture level, at a VP level, at a director level, at a C level, right? When you see that all the way through, you go, okay, we can make some things work here. Yes, things are going to be frustrating because people will always want to do the things they want to do, but the overall goal is to do the right thing. So how do we do the right thing, and how do we make that work the entire way through? and then what do I need to do to help with that? And it's a completely different ballgame at that point.
So, one of the questions I was going to ask was what practical tips do you have to get into the architecture mindset? And I think you two have done a great job of giving us some tips. So, if you have reached that level of enterprise architect, like we've been talking about, what's the next logical step for someone like that in their technology career? What are your thoughts?
Um, I think from that standpoint, you have a couple options. A, you slide out if you're like an enterprise architect, like a customer, you slide out to the partner consulting world, right? That's a fairly logical step where you're doing the effectively you're doing enterprise architecture as a service. Um, and then you go the other way and you move up in the internal organization and you start to work your way towards VP director, VP, CIO sort of level. I know a couple enterprise architects that have done that. They've made their way towards higher level positions where they're in charge. They've moved into management, but because enterprise architecture, for lack of a better term, can be less technical and more consultative, sliding over to management is more of a how you manage people thing than less of a um, how do you manage technology. And the difference there is that you already speak the business language, you already speak the sort of solution language, and less the technical speeds and feeds. And it's always good if you once you start to reach like a certain architecture level and you start getting into meetings with enterprise architects, you start to sit down and have conversations with them and understand where their thinking is, and it helps drive your thinking. And because I'll say this, I came in as a very technical architect. I could talk all the business stuff I'd like to, but it wasn't necessarily my first language. And it's slowly but surely becoming my first language, and the tech side has started to slide away. um, I still love the technology, I still have fun with it, and a lot of times I'm still the first person who goes and looks at the technology. um, but I have to figure out what it means. It's less about like, oh, I can click a button and get a thing. That's great. It's like, okay, well, what would I do with this, and what does this mean, and how would this benefit things? And that's a completely different way of thinking than when I was an engineer and I was focused on like, how do I do this cool thing and make it so that my customers were happy. It was more along the lines of like, okay, well, what does the business think about this? What does this do for them? How does this change things? I've spent a lot more time thinking about like process stuff that has absolutely nothing to do with technology. Like, why does it take so long to get an account? Or why does it take so long to spin up an instance? Why does it take so long for us to spin up an application? Those sorts of things. And the time to market. Sometimes it's technical, like, oh, hey, this process takes a long time because of the way that it's written. Okay, how do we fix that process? But then there's sometimes that technical process, but sometimes it's a people process of, oh, this actually requires a manual approval by like this one guy and he only does it on Tuesdays. Like, those are two different worlds, but they still have the same sort of functions. Instead of computers and technology being involved, there's people involved.
Yeah, and I would have to pretty much fully agree with AJ on this one. Once you hit that certain level within your company, I won't say it's an apex because technology is always evolving. You can always learn more. But once you've hit that peak, moving out into the consultant space gives you an opportunity to see different environments, take what you've learned, learn new things, apply it in many different ways. But yes, moving up in the business itself, um, whether it be, yeah, like you said, VP, all sorts of all the different titles above architect. It's just a very logical route. Um, and then you can also be that advocate. You've been in the trenches. You know how it's gone. You've done that work. You can be the advocate for your engineers, for your admins. So you can inspire that change slowly over time, should it actually need to occur in your company.
Just don't fall into the sales trap of saying, I used to be technical. Just don't do that.
I Full disclosure, I'm pre-sales now, and I tell everybody I am fighting to keep my technical side. I will not give that up.
That's good. I like the sound of that.
Well, guys, we're kissing 90 minutes here. Granted, we haven't been recording that whole time, but I want to be respectful of the time that we asked of you. Closing thoughts. I think we've talked about a lot. I think we maybe threw away everything that we were planning on talking about, but I think that we we got to the core of what it was that we wanted to address, which is that kind of change of mindset from small business to medium-sized business to large business, and that business thought orientation. And then you guys kind of unprompted kind of talked about ways to individuals might actually start that approach, and if you're in that position now, like talked about where to go from there. So I think it's been just an amazing conversation. I wanted to thank both of you.
Do you guys have any additional follow-up questions? I'm more than happy to talk about this sort of stuff. This is the interesting part, right? This is just talking about like what that thinking process is, and I spend a lot of time in my job. Like I have people on my team, and I make sure to talk to every single one of them at least once every 2 weeks. Right? I take that time to sit down and talk with them about what's going on, keep them in the loop, those sorts of things. And if you are in a position in which you have the capability to do those sorts of things, or you are a leader or you are an architect, it behooves you to sit down and take that time to talk with each person individually to understand where they want to go, to understand how they want to do their things. Certain people are very happy doing the things that they do. They don't necessarily want to they don't want to, I don't want to say they don't want to move up, but they're very happy in doing things and in what they do, and their job is very pleasing to them, and that's fine. There are also people who want to move up and they don't know how. And I've specifically taken that time with those people to say, what is it that you want to do, and how do we get you those opportunities? And one of the things we did in our last making sure the training opportunities are available, making sure the training time is taken. Right, our industry changes constantly. So here's opportunity. We make sure that people get the chances to go to training, to go to conferences, those sorts of things, because it's important, right? And the amount of money you invest there is negligible compared to trying to bring on new people to take on those functions, right? I mean, I'm just going to throw a head count out there and say, okay, a brand new head count, bare minimum, is probably, like all benefits and everything included, is probably like $75,000. A training class is $4,000. There's a $71,000 savings by having your people trained up on more than one thing. It also makes their careers a little bit more open. It lets them put a little bullet point on the resume, and it helps you because now you have other people who potentially can do the same things you do, and now you can spread that work out. The investment in training is important. Cloud training, public cloud training is crazy cheap in comparison now. Go sign up for Pluralsight. Go sign up for A Cloud Guru. I mean, all of those services are wildly cheap in comparison to some traditional vendor courses. I wasn't making names. I wasn't pointing anything out, John.
I think John took it personal.
One of them is $4,000 a class. One of them is like $25 a month. There's a difference. It's levels. But taking the time to do it on your own sometimes is helpful too. And there's a reason I haven't seen too many movies recently. There's a reason I haven't seen too much TV recently. Like those sorts of things. It's all about prioritization and trying to take that time for training. And sometimes I try to make sure that people get the time in working hours to do it, because it is work related and we're paying for it. So it's important that they go do it. But if it's something that you want to do on your own, you want to learn about containers, you want to go learn about public cloud things, you want to do VMware things and go through hands-on labs, take that time and make sure that you take the time, whether that's in your working hours or whether that's on personal time. But that's how you jump. Because then you have the knowledge, and when you speak about it in a clear fashion, people are like, oh yeah, this person is definitely knows what they're talking about and how they want to do it, and then that confidence is inspiring.
Unsolicited advice, I would say, get out of your comfort zone. Some of my greatest successes have come from saying, you know what, yeah, I don't do this at all. Let's give this a shot. I spent many years working in a factory. I knew I could do better. I took a lot of risks, went and got my education, jumped into the field. And by getting outside of what I normally did, it helps you learn. It helps you grow. If you would have asked me in high school if I'd be out speaking at conferences in front of 500 people doing a podcast where I don't even know how many people listen, I would have told you you're nuts. I was very introverted. I was very shy. It's taking that time to develop yourself and taking risks. Risks pay off. There's no fast forward. There's no easy way to get, from where I went to where I am now or where I'm going or where, AJ's been in his career or any of us on this call. There's no easy way. You have to be able to, it takes some determination. Yes, you got to catch a couple of breaks, but you do have to take your risks. You have to put your head down and you have to work. And also mentoring is huge. I got to where I am with the help of many different mentors along the way, and I'm more than willing to help. Like I meet with each one of my salespeople once a week, and it's not really a mentoring relationship, but I can help them start to evolve their understanding of tech. Like, yes, we talk about our clients, but being able to talk a little bit more about that. And we've got a new engineer in a different city. So we set up a weekly call so we can talk about this is how we do it in this company. What are you seeing in your area? This is what I'm seeing in my area. Oh, that's cool. I'm going to start doing that. It's just building that mentoring relationship. It could be a two-way street. It could be a one-way street. That's having a mentor, and don't be shy to mentor somebody. Getting out there, giving back. I've learned a lot from lots of folks, and I will forever be grateful for it. So that's kind of why I do what I do. So I hope others pick up the reins as well and learn and give back when they can and how they can.
I really like the giving back thing. It's funny how nothing helps you cement your knowledge about something than the opportunity or the requirement to teach it to somebody else, right? And you're like, ooh, wait,
Yeah.
how do I do that?
Even when they fall asleep as a college intern. Sorry, Brian. I fell asleep during your subnetting talks. It's fine. The numbers are all in my head now. It's fine. But I fell asleep like a lot. I was very tired as a college student.
But speaking of giving back, maybe somebody's out there and you want to give back a mentoring program to a friend. So there's no reason you can't send that tweet out to @NerdJourney to sign a friend up for the John White School of Mentoring today. Pricing and packaging to come. I'm sure Paul or AJ would be happy to give you some advice as well, but I'm in it for the money, and I'm in it for the money to get you some of John's time.
I'm going to sub this out to AJ.
There's no. This is the John White School. This is not the John White subs out to AJ School. Listen, packages start at $9.99 a month. You get a daily email from John, personalized to you.
Oh, this is getting worse and worse.
There's a daily affirmation in every one.
Oh no!
You have to resubscribe.
You get a private YouTube channel from John where John tells you each day how special you and you alone are.
I wonder if I could automate this.
And some audiobooks to listen to at night so you can absorb the information.
Just sign up for the Patreon as a monthly member and get access to the mentoring Snapchat and the extra content that's not available through the Nerd Journey podcast.
Go to patreon.com/nerdjourney. Sign up for our Patreon. Get access to our private Discord server where you can talk to John and Nick daily.
And if you're enjoying this, smash that subscribe button. Smash that like button.
Like and subscribe button. Leave a comment below telling you how much you love John specifically.
That's the best one yet, guys.
Oh my goodness. All right. Well, thanks so much for your time, guys. I think we're right at time. We should probably let everybody go and get some sleep. Everybody's getting punchy. Thanks again.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, not a problem.
Wow. Was that not an amazing final 2 minutes of radio? I mean, When you watch a basketball game, the final 2 minutes are electrifying, and this was exactly that to me. Talk about nuggets of wisdom.
Yeah, I wonder if those guys have improv comedy training. They really yes-anded you right away. At any rate, I really enjoyed the overall experience of talking to them. Super enjoyable and really good thoughts on career path as well. Anything else, Nick, before we break?
Besides wishing I had a mic that looks like the Death Star? No, I don't think so. Just a reminder that we definitely want people to subscribe and give us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. We want to know if we're being helpful and are always looking for interesting questions to ponder. We're collectively on Twitter at Nerd Journey.
Farewell, listeners. Tune in next time as the journey continues. I'm John White at VJourneyman for Nick Cordy at NetworkNerd_, signing off.
Adios. Let's make sure the listeners know that we're VMware Solution here. Ugh. Try that again. Want to make sure our listeners know that we're both... I should be able to do this. Hang on just a second.
All right.
Okay, here we go. 3, 2, 1.
You're losing it, man. Getting punchy.
I'm getting punchy. All right, I can be cool. I can be cool. Here we go. 3, 2, 1.